his work kept us there, and was getting along well, and my work, and the kids were settling down and so on. And then the time comes for retirement. And then there's the economic side. So that, yes, and there was always an inner, well, a yearning maybe, a little bit of, at one time it was plain homesickness for me, even after I got married. But Peter's mother had passed away, but his father was there in Seattle. Sister was there, and her family were there. A few of his friends were still there then. And so when we brought this up to our kids, and they thought it was a good idea that at your age, which was 14 years old, that you would start a new life. And of course they had been here many times and visited and knew the people, and people used to come over to Japan. So that part was okay. So as long as they said okay, and then we decided, now, if we were both we looked around in the States too, of course, but we'd both be foreigners and would have to go through a lot of rigmarole. And so the next step was easy for me to come here, return here, and it was easy for him to come with me. And he got his landed immigrant right away. So I was born on the 8th of November, 1923. I think that was the year in Tokyo was a great earthquake. And as I recall, my mom said she donated a little donation on my behalf when I was in her tummy. She loves to tell that story. I was born at the Vancouver General Hospital and lived for a short while in this Terra Nova area. It was a cannery area where a number of Japanese lived, Japanese fishermen. That, as far as I can remember. And the little stint on Paul Street was very, very short. My father tried a little business. That didn't work out. He was always a man of the sea and had been on the water since his teens, I think, from Japan all around the world. So I think that's when he bought himself a boat and went on his boat up north for the whole summer. My mother was from Hiroshima. There were a lot of people from Hiroshima who came to North America. And there was a lot in Vancouver too, as I recall. Not a very good experience with trying to run a little rooming house on Powell Street those days. And but that is when I went to kindergarten in the United Church of Canada, which today is the Buddhist temple there on Jackson and Powell. But I didn't think he liked the environment to raise a family. I was an only child, so there wasn't much of a family. But so he went to the other extreme, is what I think, way out where nobody was. The bathroom was an outhouse. Everybody had an outhouse. And yes, where did the water come? We had fine water. And this was 2 acres of land, which is mainly unused. And when my father purchased this house, it was like a wooden cottage, living room, bedroom, kitchen, and that was it. Then he built on another couple of rooms for bedrooms. It's a wooden house. And there was another building. It was a garage. The previous owners probably had a car. And going to school with all the kids, and the boys would get these snakes, grass snakes on a stick and chases it, that sort of. It's kind of, well, when I think of it, it was fun. And little running creeks with little minnows, little fish, and the little violets coming out in the spring, that sort of thing was kind of nice. And whenever my mom and I would come into town, I forgot how we came in, but it was called the Interurban Line, which today is a Sky train. I forgot where we even got off at in Vancouver. However, as we walked along Powell Street, my mother had made friends with everybody on the block there, you know, bookstore and the candy store. There was a public bath, big public bath. And she'd stop and talk to them, but I couldn't be bothered, so I just ran on ahead. Because every time these people would tell me, oh, how big you have grown, and I didn't like that, so that's my recollection of Powell Street. And of course, the 2 blocks there, one was an ice cream shop, and others were, Dr. Uchida would ask me to take his prescription paper to the drugstore on the next corner, that sort of thing. And being right across Powell grounds there's this Asahi baseball boys would come and play, and that was kind of an excitement for the Japanese community. So then I'd open the window and listen to all this noise, you see. So that was my recollection. It's a 2-room schoolhouse. It was still there when I went by some years ago this time. 4 grades in the bottom, 4 grades at the top. And I vividly remember. First day, grade 1. I must have been a novelty. And I even remember the girl's name, Mary Bolton. She let me sit beside her, you know, to welcome me. Maybe she was in grade 2. But anyway, and she put her arm around me, you know, and that I remember very vividly. And the 2 teachers upstairs and downstairs, they were so nice. And those days, you know, you got the strap for doing something you're not supposed to. And as I recall, we, in a line after or during recess, well, anyway, couldn't be recess because we were all in a line. You're not supposed to drink out of the fountain in the hall. But I think some of us did. So the poor teacher had to give us a strap. So she got a ruler and we all lined up and she went tap, 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 and that sort of thing. Kind of nice. I mean, not nice, but it was a fond memory with a nice teacher. My folks knew one family there in this little village of about 9 families, I think, 9 Japanese families. And the cannery factory, actually, where all the fish was brought in, and bunkhouses for single people, like Chinese workers. And when the doctor said to my folks, it might be good to come out to where there's salt air after my illness was over. So she came over here to ask about some friends of hers at this cannery, and there was one cabin open. Well, it's a house, but like a cabin, you know, unpainted. And so, well, that's fine. So for the summer, we planned to stay there for the summer. And but then my father, he takes his boat up north, comes back down after the season is over at the end of summer, and he found that he could moor his boat right there in West Vancouver because this little village of Japanese, they were mainly fishermen. Brothers or the fathers were all fishermen, and they had their boats there. So then we decided to stay the winter, and that went on and on and on because my father would go off in the summer, and the cannery was a going concern at that time, winter or summer, lots of all kinds of fishes. And the ladies would work in the canneries, you see, canning the fish. And I found that fun. I found it fun. And the way the fish went into the cans and how it was sealed. And then the factory, it was a very, it had quite an odor, but you get used to it, you know. Mm-hmm. And it was very interesting. I think I went to a 6th grade somewhere here in West Vancouver, maybe about 5th grade. Then I got ill with pneumonia. In those days, they kept you in the hospital 3 weeks, I think. So the parents got worried again, and the doctor said, you go where there's salt air. Well, when the war started in December, we immediately moved back to our house in Burnaby. It was vacant then. Mm. And, well, when we got there, we just were way out, away from the rest of the Japanese news, you see. And so, in that respect, we would be about the last Japanese, almost the last Japanese to be evacuated the following year when evacuation began. I don't know exactly when it began, but of course, all of a sudden the Japanese were all clumped into one, enemy aliens, and had to leave 100 miles inland. So, as I recall, we just waited out there, and hearing that we could only take a certain amount of things, so that we left some, well, to me, precious Hina doll sets and parents' large frame pictures and other things that you couldn't carry in your suitcase in this so-called garage. And my mother opened up the kitchen floor, wooden floor, and left some rice and soy sauce and a little bit of stuff there because we thought we'd be back. And my father's age bracket, Japan had never lost a war, you see. So he thinks that, well, we'll be back in half a year type of thing, you know. But that wasn't so, of course. I don't even recall getting on the train to go until we got to Hope, and then we were hoarded onto the back of a truck, standing up into the mountains of today's Sunshine Valley. And by then, many of the Japanese able-bodied young men were sent off to road camps, or otherwise they were in these camps prior to people coming to build these houses, cabins. And because me and my family were about the last ones to be evacuated, by then it was a flourishing little colony, lots of people there in Tashme. Choosing Tashme because it was the nearest that we could come back home. And they had built hundreds of houses, cabins, and all lined up, 1st Avenue to 10th Avenue. So we were about the last, so we're on 10th Avenue, way at the back there. And this was at the end of October. Lots of snow already. And of course, these little houses were to accommodate more than 3 people, which means we were 3. So another couple came to the other side of the house, of the cabin. One main room in the middle, 2 bunk beds on both sides, and a kitchen stove in that room, and of course, lots of outhouses. Miss Hyodo, pardon me, she later married Reverend, but she was very much an educator, professionally educator. She was already a teacher. And she helped us, she and some couple of other education-minded people, not necessarily teachers, but Miss Hyodo was a teacher, helped us get some young people together to help the children, of which there was a whole bunch of kids, a couple of thousand of us there, you see. And so I was one of them. And there was this barn. Have you ever been to Sunshine Valley? It's still there, big barn. And the upstairs was school rooms. Not rooms, in those days it was the folding partitions between classes and one big place for your auditorium. It's the top of a barn. And so we had these, put the kids in classes, and I guess we just took a chance as to what little kids we were going to, grade 1 or 2 or whatever, But whatever we did, we had nothing. No pencil, well, maybe we got some pencils somewhere, but nothing at that time. But anyway, that went on for a while, and I don't remember how long that went on, that we had to do everything. But eventually, the British Columbia Commission acknowledged that it was, we'd have a proper school by the Education Ministry. So it was called Tashmi School. So then we got all the textbooks, the regular textbook. Then we have to study, study to teach the next day type of thing, which it was hard work, but enjoyable. If it's a camp like that, everybody knows each other too much. And it's wartime, and the Japanese, even before that, no dancing type of thing. And but anyway, this barn, the barn, well, the classrooms, and they take the partitions down and you have a big hall. So there was this big band can music, and there'd be dances. However, there has to be a chaperone. So our missionary teachers used to come and be the chaperone. So there was I did a lot of dancing those days, So that, and I guess there were romances. I'm pretty sure there were. But you couldn't go anywhere without somebody seeing you. And it's a tight-knit little village, And then, of course, at the end of the 4 years, in our camp anyway, it's going to be demolished the next year. So you go to Japan or you go east somewhere. Every family had different situations. And of course, my father was in his 70s already. And he wanted to see his old house again. And of course, I was not wanting to go. And my mother was half not wanting to go. But where we would go to? Couldn't go back to Vancouver at the time. And I didn't have any brothers or sisters or anybody else, you see. So I thought, well, we'll go along. And I just made up my mind. then and there, that I'll go for the adventure. Well, I had a good trip across because I like the water. I understand some poor people were seasick all the way, 11 days, I think, but I enjoyed it. I met with the crew, some of the young Korean boys, sailors, or whoever they were. And my first impression was, oh, there's a lot of sugar on the table, not rationed. That was my first impression. And then you can hear this from Irene as well, but when we got to this old naval base, Japanese old naval base, where Commodore Perry came, apparently, a rundown, beat up, thousands of us, in this big room, and I had to sleep there, and it was something. And then going to, I don't know about other people, but going to, on the train, going far, far away, like my father's place, you went in through the window and got out the window. It was so like the pictures you see in India, or people are hanging on the outside, something like that. During that time, another relative came from Yokohama who had been born in Seattle. She was 60-something already. I call her my aunt. And she said, oh, you poor thing, I know exactly how you feel. I was the same way when I came back at 9 or something. So you come to my house, I've got an extra room. They didn't get burned out, you see, in Yokohama, a suburb. So that's how I got to the big city. And when I pulled into Yokohama, my cousin brought me in. This is Yokohama. It was flat, all burned out. I thought, oh, that's Yokohama. Was. Not as bad as Hiroshima, of course, but very flat. And then I stayed at her place for 3 years and worked with the American military and government in Yokohama. It's my first job. I've never worked in an office. I learned stenography here in West Vancouver. I never used it, you see. Never worked in an office, and I went to this Yokohama place. And they said, oh, yes, you can take her place. So I'm watching this lady who's going to quit. Her name was Marie, too. She was half French. And I saw her working so efficiently. Those days you put carbon in one by one, And she's speaking fluent Japanese. And I thought, oh, gosh. I had a terrible inferiority complex. But I took her place for a short while. She was in a family way. And so she had to quit. First airlines came, that was Northwest, only cargo. And then the first traders came from Seattle. And they offered me half yen, Japanese yen, and half dollars in Seattle. I said, fine. And then Peter had just come back from China. And he's already graduated business, so then he and a group of people started a import-export. And they were our agents, the company I worked with. That's how I met him. That's a long time ago, 60 years ago. He was an American when he left here. And he went because he couldn't get a job at that time, so he went to see his brother in Nagano. And then the war broke out, and he couldn't get back. So I went because the war ended. He couldn't come home because the war started. And that's, I don't know how or why, but the Japanese police were always down your neck if you, like him, receiving letters in English. The secret police were on you. Or if you came from North America, and things like that. And yet they hauled a lot of boys like in his position from the States to the Japanese army, mainly for their English. He was in China with earphones getting the news in English, spying. Around the age where my son was about 3 or 4, a colleague, she was a Nisei from Hawaii, a lady friend. She was the best stenographer there ever was. And she said, come and do this kind of work. It's easy. All you do is type. And at that time, Japan was opening up to all these international conference events, you see. And a lot of them were from the United Nations committee meetings were coming to Japan, to Tokyo. And so that's how I got started, part-time working, freelance working, either in the secretariat for the short while they're here, or later on we had to do verbatim reporting, which is, you know what that is. You know. And there were about 4 of us who were free. I was Pittman, and my friend was Greg Shorthand. One was a speed writer, and the other one was Greg. We all had different, and we worked like a horse, but it was very interesting. I think our kids, especially our son who went to the local Japanese school, I think they had a quite difficult time trying to understand us sometimes, perhaps me especially, because I'm home. And I know that when our boy was about 3rd grade, he came home sulking one day, and he said, "Mommy, you were born in an enemy country." I thought, oh, what are they teaching at school? But I think it wasn't exactly. The teacher probably said Japan and America went to war. So immediately, anybody who's foreign there is from America, you see, those days. So something like that did happen. But of course, that's all in the past. And as they grew up, they accepted us as not quite Japanese, not quite American, you know. And we were in a very nice neighborhood. They were quite international people. But I'm sure they thought that a little odd too. But anyway, sometimes it was difficult because the notices from the schools and the kindergarten, it's all in Japanese. And I can read some, but I can't read it all, so I have to wait till Peter comes home, and he might bring out the dictionary. That was a little bit. Sometimes it was a holiday and we didn't know, you know, things like that. So that was funny, and so sometimes I think the kids thought we were funny parents, maybe. It was a difficult road, especially this period of living in Japan. A period, yeah. I think if it wasn't for all the Americans coming over, I would perhaps be back a long time ago. I don't know. It's not only to speak English, but customs and rather rigid rules and regulations that you find generally in Japan, as you know. People are more freer these days, I guess. You know, the younger people are more freer. But my age bracket, it wasn't that way. So it was pretty rigid. Hopefully that we will remain as healthy as can be together, you know. And if I had a little more energy, I would go out and help at the museum. I like to do a little volunteer work. If I were a little younger, I'd go to the east side and make sandwiches or something, you know. I really would like to do that. Or something with little children, but little children don't like too older persons. I would like to be remembered as a, well, I don't know if as happy as a cheerful person who, I can take things the wrong way, but somebody who didn't take things the wrong way all the time. I always think there's always a good day that follows a bad day. That's what I think. It has, you know, some experiences in that respect, so yeah, take it in stride.